Hello, welcome to the final section on the CBSE NET December 2014 paper first. We would be covering the last section of the questions for this examination. So the first question that we'll be starting today deals with reading comprehension passage. Now this reading comprehension passage, most of the questions that were asked from it were very direct. Okay, so if you read this passage very carefully and understand it, you will get to know the answers very easily. Okay, so let's start with what was the basic element that was explained in this passage. So this passage basically talks about two things. One is writing a novel and another is writing something on politics. So the writer here says that when you are trying to write something on politics, you are trying to introduce ideas and ideologies, while writing on any literary topic is just writing about the real state, or it's more about the flesh and the blood, as it has been said here. So here it says, in this statement it explains the reason why politics does not seem amiable to the highest kind of literary representation. So most of the questions that were asked were basically focused on this passage. So let's start with the first question. The construct of politics by its very nature is. So in the passage, the writer has clearly mentioned why politics does not seem enable to the highest kind of literary representation to arise from the fact that politics by its very nature is constituted of ideas and ideologies. Okay, so the correct answer here is ideas and ideologies, and this can be directly found from the passage. The another way of solving these kind of questions is, if you are having any doubt understanding the language of the passage, the best way is to refer the passage in Hindi language. That would give you the exact meaning of the passage, and based on that you can solve the questions. Okay. The next question talks about literature deals with. Okay. Now here, if I continue with this sentence, it says literature, it's argued, is about human experiences rather than intellectual abstractions. It deals with what is called the felt reality of human flesh and blood. So here it clearly mentions that it explains the felt reality of human flesh and blood. Now let's move on to the question. The literature deals with, the correct answer is here directly given, felt reality of human life or human flesh and blood. Okay, so the correct answer here would be D. Now let's move on to the next question. The observation of the novelist McCarthy reveals. So if I move on to the passage back, in the last line, it says, here McCarthy's formulations start, okay, and her formulation of the precise nature of incompatibility between ideas on one hand and novels on the other hand. Okay, so what she's basically trying to explain is the compatibility issues between ideas and the novel. Okay, so the correct answer here would be C, that is compatibility issues. The next is, according to passage, a political novel often turns out to be. Now this is again directly mentioned in the passage, that political novel turns out to be a politics of its own. Okay, so if I read here, a political novel often turns out to be not merely a novel about politics, but a novel with a politics of its own. For it seeks not merely to show us how things are, but has fairly definite ideas about how things should be. Okay, and make us to move in a desired direction. So it clearly says that it's novel with its own politics. So a political novel turns out to be a novel with its own politics, is exactly mentioned in the passage. So this time the passage was much more direct, okay, as compared to the June 2014 examination, where you were asked to interpret the passage, and based on that you were supposed to answer the questions. But here most of the questions were directly from the exact language that was given in the passage. Now the last question is, political novel reveals. Okay, now on this question, this is a big dicey question, because at the last he says, through a political novel, one tries to enlist the cause Okay, and list the particular cause or the ideology. In short, here it says in this sentence, in short, it seeks to convert and enlist the reader to a particular case or ideology. Okay, not literature but propaganda. Okay, so this is the line that conveys this meaning, and this basically explains it is definitely talking about ideology. So most of the students got confused here and tried to put this C as an answer. But it's important here, it's not the ideology of the readers, it's the ideology of the writer. So the correct answer is the writer's perception. Okay, so B would be the correct answer here. So writer is providing his or her own perception, and it's not the perception of the person who is reading the article. Okay, so this section on reading comprehension, as we have discussed, is much more simpler, except the last question, which is based on conceptual understanding. Let's move on to the next set. Now this is a direct question on analogy. So warrior is related to sword. So warrior fights in the battle with sword. Okay, carpenter needs a saw to make furniture. Farmer needs a plow to farm the land. Similarly, author needs a pen to write. So the correct answer here would be pen. Now next question is based on Venn diagram. Now Venn diagram is a very important section. Last year also there was one question on Venn diagram, and this section is very scoring. You have direct question which is given, all the information is given, so you just have to practice at least 10 type of questions on Venn diagram, and that's it. You can easily solve all the questions on Venn diagram. So in this question you have three circles A, B and C. So A represent honest people, B represents sincere people, and C represents politicians. Okay, now what is asked? You have to select a code that indicates honest politicians who are not sincere. So honest and politicians, that means intersection of A and C. Okay, so honest politician would be intersection of A and C, but who are not sincere. So you will not include region B in this. So I won't include, I'll exclude the region B. So I'm excluding this B. Now the only remaining region which intersects A and C is the region S. Okay, so this region S here would be the correct answer. So region S, okay, just a second. Okay, so you have region S as the correct answer here. That is the intersection of A and C, excluding B. So B is the sincere people, and you do not want to include the people who are sincere. So it's just a class of honest politicians who are not sincere at work. The answer would be S. Okay, and if the question was you have to indicate the class of honest politicians who are sincere as well, then it would be the center region, that's the P. Okay, but here the correct answer is S. Now this question is a very important question. Now all the three questions that we will be discussing now are based on the concept of philosophy and logic. Philosophy and logic has gained importance in starting June 2014. Every June 2014 also there were three questions on logic. This time again there were three questions on logic, and all of these three questions were on the theory of logic. Okay, so you need to be very strong at the fundamental concepts on application of logic and argumentative writing and the concept of square of opposition. So let's first discuss the type of arguments. Now this statement, a man ought no more to value himself for being wiser than a woman. If he owes his advantage to a better education, then he ought to boost his courage for beating a man when his hands were tied. Okay, so in this passage, what the writer is trying to convey is, if there is a person whose hands are tied and I am beating that person and I am saying I am courageous because I am beating a person whose hands are tied, then only I can say that I am much more wiser than a woman, and because I have more education. So this is something which explains the real situation of a woman, where they say women could not get good education and is not considered much more wiser just because her hands were tied and she was not given proper education. Okay, that's why a man considers himself more wiser than a woman and considers that he has a better advantage as compared to women. Okay, so this concept where you are trying to provide that you are beating a man by tying his hands and showing your courage and explaining that you can prove that you are much more wiser than women, you are trying to give a analogy. So this is a kind of analogical argument. Now let me explain the remaining three arguments. In deductive argument, I can say I am sitting on a chair and chair is on the ground. So I am on the ground. Okay. So that's a kind of deductive argument. From one, I am trying to deduce another. Under hypothetical statement, I can give a hypothesis. If it rains, we won't go to market. That means if it is raining, we won't get a if it is raining, we won't go to market, and if we won't go to market, we won't buy the chocolates. That means if it is raining, I won't buy a chocolate. But this is hypothetical argument. I can say that I won't be getting chocolates only if it is raining. And factual statement is something which is given directly whether it is true or false. Okay, so this statement particularly is a kind of analogical argument, and if you are having problem solving these kinds of questions, it's better to refer the Hindi section or the other language for the same question. That would help you assist solve this question in a much better and simpler form. Okay. Now next question. By which of the propositions wise men are hardly afraid of death is contradicted? Now this question is a question based on square of opposition. So for this, I suggest you to refer the class on the square of opposition available on YouTube. Okay, so this is a snapshot from the class itself. So you have four elements here. Okay, in the first, the top two are the universal and the bottom two are the particular elements. A denotes the universal truth. Okay, this denotes universal no. So if I'm saying all is red here I'm saying nothing is red. Here I'm saying something is red, and here I'm saying something is not red. Okay, so the statement A and O are contradictory, and the statement E and I are contradictory. Now in this passage, in this statement, the author says wise men are hardly afraid of death. So when it's talking about wise men, it implies that all wise men. Okay, and hardly means merely, or I can consider this as not. So I can say this is a statement of type E, where I'm trying to say all wise men are not afraid of death. So the contradictory statement would be I and would be this. That means some wise men are afraid of death. Okay. So choice A would be the correct answer, where I'm saying some wise men are afraid of death. So this question is a typical question on a square of opposition problem. This was asked last year also, and it's a very important concept in the logic and philosophy that you must understand in detail. Okay, so every time you have one question, and if you have 20 minutes to devote to this class, you will, I'm sure that you are about to secure 100% in this question. Okay, now the next question. When in a group of propositions, one proposition is claimed to follow from other proposition, it is an argument. Okay, so if I'm saying there is one proposition which is following from another proposition, that means I am giving an argument. Okay, so the correct answer here would be A, argument. Now this question is based on logical analytical reasoning. So if I want to solve this question, the best way is to form a table. So I'll write the name of the students here. It's Namita, Samita. It's brilliant, studious, obedient, and regular. Okay. So Namita and Samita are brilliant and studious. Okay. Then you have Anita and Karabi. They are obedient and irregular. Okay. Then you have Babita and Namita. So both of them are irregular but brilliant. Okay, this we have already written, she's brilliant. And then you have Samita and Kavita. So you have Samita already here and Kavita. Both of them are regular and obedient. Okay, so you have regular and obedient, and this is also regular and obedient. Okay, so only in this case we can see, so this X is here, this is for this Namita. Okay, this is the line for Namita, this is for Samita, this is for Anita, this is for Karabi, this is for Babita, and finally this is for Kavita. So now the question is asked, who among them is brilliant, obedient, regular, and studious? All four of these. So only Samita, again Samita, we have all four of these as tick mark. So the answer would be Samita alone. Now another way to solve this question is in a very simple form. Since you are asked, who is brilliant and studious? So brilliant, obedient, irregular, and studious. So these are irregular. So I'll remove these two statements here itself. Okay. Now I am left with just two statements. Now I have to see which of these three, among which of these they are common. So Namita, Samita, and Samita and Kavita. So the only person who is common is Samita here. That means Samita is brilliant, studious, regular, and obedient. So I can solve this question directly also. Okay, and if I want to make 100% sure that I'm not making any kind of mistakes, so it's better to draw a table and solve this kind of question. Okay, but this question again is a very scoring question, and there is every time one or two questions on analytical reasoning that are asked. Now we have a final question that is based on DI or data interpretation. Now this question on data interpretation, you have various sectors and you have the carbon dioxide emission given in million metric tons based on various sectors and the various years. Now, first of all, what I'll do is I'll find out the total carbon dioxide emission for each sector. So for that, what I'll do is I'll sum up all the values in the horizontal fashion. Okay, so when I sum up these values, I get it as 1030, 1300, 1440, then I have 1700 and 1950. Okay, so these are the values, are the total values that I get here. Now the question says by what percentage the total emissions of carbon dioxide have increased from 2005 to 2009. So total emissions I have to do is final minus initial by initial into 100. So that means 1950 minus 1030 divided by 1030 into 100. This would be the answer. So the answer would be approximately 89.32%. So the correct answer here is A. Now the next question is a very, very tricky question. Here what is asked is the average annual growth rate of carbon dioxide emission in power sector. So you have the power sector data here. What you have to do is you have to find the average annual growth rate. For this, I'll have to find out the growth rate for each year. So for 2005 and 6, it would be 600 minus 500 divided by 500 into 100. Then for 6 and 7, it would be 650 minus 600 by 600 into 100. Okay. The next for 2007 and 8, it would be 700 minus 650 divided by 650 into 100. And finally, it would be 800 minus 700 divided by 700 into 100. Okay. So when I'll solve all these four, I'll get the answer, say whatever numbers I get. Let me cross check this. So supposedly I get 20%, around 8%, around 7%, and around 14%. Okay. Then what I'll have to do is to find out the average annual growth rate, I'll have to do 20 plus 8 plus 7 plus 14 divided by 4. Since I have to find the average or the mean here. So that would give me the average annual growth rate for CO2 emission. I cannot do it by doing for the first year and the last year and then subtracting it. That won't give me the correct yield. Okay, so it's a kind of compounded method where you have to find average annual growth rate. So I have to find the growth rate for individual each year and then I have to average it out. So the correct answer here would be A, that's 12.57%. Now the next question says, what is the percentage contribution of power sector to the total emission in 2008? So I'll move on to the data in 2008. Power is 700 and the total is 1700. So the percentage contribution of power would be 700 by 1700 into 100. So when I solve this, I get around 41%. So this would be the correct answer. Now next question talks about percentage contribution of industry to total carbon dioxide emission was minimum in which year. So I have to just check out the values from 2005 to 2008. So what I'll do is I'll take out the industrial value and the total value. So it would be 200 by 1030 into 100. Then it would be 300 by 1300 into 100. Then it would be 320 by 1440 into 100. And finally 400 by 1700 into 100. I'll solve all these four and I'll get certain values here. So for example, if I get the values as 19%, 23%, 22%, and around 23%. So this is the lowest value. So I have the correct answer as A, that is in 2005, the contribution of industry to the total emission of carbon dioxide was minimum. And the last question talks about percentage growth of carbon dioxide emission from power sectors during 2005 to 9 was. So in this question, what I have to do is, I have to find out the percentage growth in power sector from 2009 to 2005. So in 2009, it was 800 and 5 it was 500. So this would be 800 minus 500 divided by the base year 500 into 100. That is 300 by 500 into 100. So it's 3 by 5 into 100. I can say 3 into 20. So it's 60%. Okay, so the correct answer here would be 60%. And the last question says, which sector has recorded maximum emission during 2005 to 2009? So for this, I'll calculate all of these. So power we have already calculated in the above question. So the power was 60%. Now let's move on to the industry. Industry is 450 minus 200. So it's 450 minus 200 divided by 200 into 100. For commercial, it would be 320 minus 150 and last is 200 minus 80. So it would be 320 minus, what was it? It was 320 minus 150 by 150 and 200 minus 80 by 80 into 100. Okay, so I'll solve all these. I'll get the values, say 125% here, 113% here, and 175% here. And this was 60% we have already calculated. So which sector has recorded maximum growth? Now in the previous question it was asked minimum, so we took the lowest value. In this question it's asked maximum, so we'll take the highest value. So the correct answer would be agriculture here. So this was the question on data interpretation. This question was this time the data interpretation question was much more better because the values were simpler to solve. So the calculations were very easy as compared to last year where there was a question on foreign tourists. There were huge number of data that you have to solve. So this year, the data interpretation was very simple in terms of calculations. But the only thing was the question number 56, where it was asked to calculate the average annual growth rate, where most of the students got confused. Okay, so with this, we cover the complete paper on the on the CBSE NET December 2014 examination paper 1. In the next session, we would be covering the exam analysis, where we would be doing a comparative analysis on the types of questions that were asked for June 2014 and compare it to December 2013 paper. So for that, stay tuned and have a good day ahead.